Hello, Oak Tree family, and welcome back to another week of Virtual Bible Club. It is already week 9 of Virtual Bible Club. It does not seem like it has been that long. Since it's been so long, I just wanted to go back and review with us some of the stories that we've already learned. I thought that would be helpful for me, and it might be helpful for you guys to remember and to kind of see how the stories tie together. Just going to give a real quick summary of each one. So our very first week, we did the story of Caleb and Joshua. So some of you guys, if you joined later on, you may not have heard some of these stories. So the story of Caleb and Joshua, you see the picture there. One of my big takeaways from this story, and one of the things I want us to remember, is that they trusted in God even when it didn't make sense, because they knew that God would keep his promises. They knew he was bigger than anything that scared him. All those giants and the things that they saw, Caleb and Joshua believed in God even when nobody else did, because they knew that God was more powerful than anything that they were scared of. And then in week 2, we learned about Rahab, and she's the one that housed the spies that came from God's people. She hid the spies even though she knew that she would be in danger. Because she knew that the spies' God, our God, is the one true God. And God welcomed her into his family, into his people. And she became the great-great-great-great-great-grandmother of David, who we learned about a couple weeks ago. So then week 3, we talked about Deborah. And she was that powerful prophet woman who led God's people, or went with God's people into battle. She listened to and she obeyed God. She was a fearless leader because she knew God would help his people win. And she praised God for all he did. So when God gave them that victory, she and Barak threw basically a little party. They had a little dance and song party to praise God. And we can do the same things when we see that God has done amazing things. The next week we talked about Gideon. He was another like a judge like Deborah was. But I think it's so cool because Gideon's just such this fearful little guy, and I can be like that sometimes too. But God chose to use him even though he was afraid. And so all people saw how powerful God was, or God is, because he used this scary little guy and a teeny tiny army of just like 300 guys to defeat this huge enemy. So it just really shows us how big God is. Then we learned about Hannah, and it's much smaller of a scale, but she prayed and she told God about something that she really, really wanted. She wanted a baby, and God kept his promise, and he gave her what she asked for. And then she gave her son back to God, and that son was Samuel. He grew up in the temple serving God. God spoke to him, and Samuel was ready to listen, even from when he was a little boy. And so all of his life, he listened to and obeyed God. We can do the same thing. And then next comes David. Like I talked about, Rahab's great-great-great-great-grandson. David, again, he was just a little young kid as well. He couldn't stand by when he heard Goliath, this big old giant, say horrible and untrue things about God. He wasn't afraid of Goliath, even though he was so big, because he knew that God was with him and would help him win. And God did just that. And then quite a few years passed, but then we learned about Elijah. And Elijah, he was a prophet, right, who listened to God and talked to God. And Elijah knew that God was the only true God, but most of God's people had forgotten about God and who he was. So Elijah was used by God to show God's power, so that everyone could see, and they all praised God as the only true God when God sent fire down from heaven. I think that story is amazing, just to see how big and powerful God is. And then this week, we come to Esther. And my favorite thing about her story is just seeing how God allowed her to become queen so that she could be used by God to help save her people. And then she went in to speak with the king, even though she was afraid, because she knew that God was with her. And we can do things that scare us too. I think that's like a common theme in all of these stories. All these people believe in God, even when sometimes it doesn't make sense. And we can do the same thing. We can believe in God, that he is with us, even when it doesn't make sense. And we can walk forward in faith. And we call this like the People of Faith, or the Daring Faith series, because these people have faith. They believe that God was good and could do things that it looked like might be impossible. So he can do the same thing for us and in our lives. So we should be praying, we should be talking to him, and we should be believing that he can do big and amazing things. I love you guys, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.